16 edition. We have the only man that makes me feel short. And I'm not a short guy, but he's been a staple on the low carb cruise since year 3, and the last few years he's been the guy doing all the wonderful recordings for us. So let's give a hand to the DietDoctor team. And if you've enjoyed the cruise audio and the video that they've been doing, go support him at DietDoctor.com. It's so silly, inexpensive, and you get a 30-day free trial at DietDoctor.com. Definitely go check it out. It's worth the price of admission. How many are members already? Yeah. So go check that out. But we're really privileged to have you back here, Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt. So give him a warm, low-carb cruise welcome.
Thank you, Jimmy. So this is my favorite place to talk, actually. It's great to be back. Now this picture depicts a recent crime scene. And we're on the border to a small country in Northern Europe, and a truck driver is getting arrested, and the crime is illegal smuggling of butter. So why would anyone smuggle butter into a country? Well, it's because there's no butter in the stores. Because people ate it all, and they want more. This strange story, we'll get back to it, but it started 3 decades ago, in 1984, and that's the year that George Orwell wrote about in his novel about Big Brother. And fittingly, in the same year, a large campaign was launched by Big Brother, or at least the American government, to teach the American people to fear fat and cholesterol, right? Yep. With no real proof. I mean, you know this, we're not going to get into details about it, but no real proof that it would ever help to prevent heart disease, as people believed. And the problem is, of course, that if you eat less fat, you will eat more carbs, you will raise your insulin, the fat-storing hormone in your body, and look what happened. This is statistics over the obesity in America in 1985, the year after this campaign was launched. In the blue states here, there are around 10% obese people. In the white states, there are no certain data even. So let's move ahead 2 years. Look closely and see if you can spot the difference. 87, 89, 91, 93, and 95. And you see something is happening rapidly. These dark blue states, there wasn't even a single one 10 years before. That's over 15% obesity, so a huge increase from 10 to 15% in just 1 decade. Let's move on. 97, 99, 01, 03, 05, 07, 09, 2011, and 2014. And you see it's changing color all the time. So the yellow states over 20%, orange over 25, red over 30, and dark red over 35% obesity. Massive increase, and obese Americans have become common in just a few decades, in just 1 generation. And obviously this is not a genetic problem, it's something in the environment that afflicts sensible people, right? I mean, everybody's genes do not change in 1 generation. Something happened. It happened just when we got rid of the fat, we added sugar instead. In many cases. And we have a giant problem that's not going away. No, it's getting worse. Extreme obesity is exploding in America. So how can we stop this? Maybe we can learn something from where I come from, which is a small country in Northern Europe called Sweden. And there are 9 million Swedes. Actually, there are even fewer this week, because how many did this week? Yeah. I think there's a new record. I think we're possibly more than 30 Swedes here. So that's pretty good. I'm sure they're missing out. So Swedes, of course, are known for 3 different things. And the first one, as everybody who's been at the shows on this cruise knows, is the pop group ABBA. And the second one is the Nobel Prize. And the third one is a bit newer. It's fad diets. Because there was an article in this very fancy medical journal, The Lancet, a few years ago, with this title, Fad Diets in Sweden, of all places. And they were horrified by the popularity of a diet called LCHF, standing for low carb, high fat. And it's very similar to an Atkins diet, low carb and high fat. And this has become super popular in Sweden. Why? Well, maybe because we need it. Because have a look at what's happened in Sweden. These are statistics over sales of butter in Sweden from 1985 to the left up until 2008. And you see it went down to less than half. And then it sort of started going up. But have a look at, if we add statistics over the overweight and obesity prevalence in Sweden, you would sort of suspect that if you eat less of this calorie-rich butter, you would lose weight, right? Like Americans did? No. See, like these are like mirror images of each other. So just like in America, just like everywhere else, you eat less butter, you eat more carbs instead, you get more obesity. So in the last few years, check out the butter comeback in Sweden. It's way up. So what would happen to overweight and obesity statistics? Obviously, when you eat all these extra calories, you will gain weight, right? No. Suddenly, this obesity epidemic seems to have stopped, and the last dot is even going down. Maybe we're about to turn this epidemic around. Maybe as the first country in the world, that would be cool, but maybe someone will make it before we do. I think it's gonna happen. All we need to do is to realize the mistakes that we made and fix them. It's hard, but it can be done. There's no reason why everybody should keep getting more obese forever. There's no reason for that. So what happened in Sweden? Well, 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, in 2005, a colleague of mine, a family doctor called Dr. Annika Dahlqvist, she had struggled with her weight her entire life. And then she tried something she'd never tried before. She tried a low-carb Atkins diet. And suddenly something happened. She lost weight without hunger. Felt great. And she started to learn more about this and talk to people, and then she started to give the same advice to her patients. And what happened? Well, people with obesity lost weight. People with diabetes normalized their blood sugars. You know this. I mean, it's nothing new, but to her, it was a revelation. And she started a blog to spread knowledge about this. She ended up in the papers, on the TV, became a big deal in Sweden. And a couple of dietitians got really worried about this, and they thought people will start dying like flies from all the butter they're suddenly eating, right? So she notified the National Board of Health and Welfare, the highest medical authority in Sweden, and what they could do is tell her, you absolutely need to stop this. They could even take away her medical license if it seemed necessary. But what they did was, they did an investigation. It took 2 years to go through all the science to really make sure that they're making the right decision here. And in 2008, in January, they came to their conclusion. And this ended up in all the papers, on all the television channels in Sweden, because it was such a great story. But the small doctor versus the large government, and the small doctor turned out to be right. Because they said, keep going. We're not finding anything wrong with this. You can keep doing what you're doing. They said low-carb diets can today be seen as compatible with scientific evidence and best practice for weight loss, because there are studies showing that it does work, and there is no evidence that it's harmful. Which is sort of the opposite of what people have always been saying, like low-carb is a fad diet and it's dangerous, right? People are still saying it sometimes. But here, the highest medical authority in Sweden said the opposite. It's proven to work. There's no evidence that it's harmful. So this was a revolution in the debate in Sweden, and that's when it got really exciting. And you can track this in different ways. I like statistics, and you can find really fancy statistics using Google Trends. Has anybody used Google Trends? You follow like the trend lines of what people are searching for online. And in Sweden, if you look at all the popular diets used for weight loss and health improvement, The most popular ones in Sweden used to be a low glycemic index diet or paleo diets or intermittent fasting or Weight Watchers. And then we have the LCHF in blue, and the other ones are in different colors. And you can see the statistics from 2008 up until 2010 here on the screen. You can see the blue line wasn't even on the radar before this investigation and this big news. And then in 2008 it starts going up, and in 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years, it became the most popular diet in Sweden, at least measured by Google searches. So what happened after that? Did it fade away like any other sort of quick fad diets? No. It sort of rose to a class of its own and became more popular than the other popular diets combined in the top 5. And this is what I showed here on the cruise last year, so let's see what's happened since then. It's actually still more popular than all the other in the top 5 combined. So it's, I mean, you can see that in 2012 and 13, that's when the real peak is up here. That's when it was on the front of every paper, like every week, and in every television channel, like several times a month. And then media gets bored, of course, they're always looking for new things. So the hype has sort of died down, like it always does, but it's still going so strong, year after year after year, 8 years now. And the only reason I can think of for that is that it works, and people can see that it's working for people around them. And they want to try it themselves. So one survey came to the conclusion that 23% of Swedes actually tried to eat low carb a few years ago, and 5% on a very strict low carb diet. And this also spread to our neighboring countries like Norway. And this was on the border to Norway when they had their severe butter shortage because the stores were not ready for this sudden explosion in popularity. And this even ended up here in America on the CARB report, discussing the Norwegian butter crisis and how it's so hard to get it back because trying to milk the reindeers, they keep flying away. And then he ended the segment with having a big butter stick with butter on it and eating it just to spite them. Here's a newspaper page from Norway with an ad saying that if you buy an Audi R8 in December, really luxury car, really expensive in Norway. Norway is an expensive country, so like about $300,000 or something. But then they will give you a pound of butter for free. So it does sound a little bit like a fad, but the thing is, it's not. Because it keeps going. I mean, it's been, it's been going for 150 years or more. Because it works. It's really perhaps time to ask if low fat is a fad. Because that has not been going on for 150 years. That is not working for people. It's only been going for like 30 plus years, and it's based on this old idea that, fat and cholesterol is bad for your heart. But it doesn't work, not even that is true. If you look at all the science, and it's been coming out, a number of reviews of all the science in the last few years, and they all come to basically the same conclusion. There is no evidence that this ever was true, that eating less fat or saturated fat could ever reduce heart disease. So it's not working. And a couple of quotes from Swedish professors talking about this in the last few years. Here's one called Professor Berglund. He said that 2 generations of Swedes have been given bad dietary advice and have avoided fat for no reason. It's time to rewrite the dietary guidelines and base them on modern science. So, when this is happening, this is getting really, really popular in Sweden. We also get a great natural experiment because people are eating more butter. Will this make Swedes die from heart disease? We have perfect statistics in Sweden. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but we're a little bit obsessed with statistics. We have like the best statistics in the world. Maybe after Iceland, I don't know, something about Northern Europeans. But we have great statistics, and this is what they show. So this is the number of people who get heart attack, heart disease for men. You know, men are a little bit worse off, and for women from 1990 and up until a few years ago, and it's just going down, down, down. You see the green area to the right. That's the time period when low carb and butter has become more and more popular, and it's not going up. If anything, it's going down quicker than ever. And if you add the statistics for for butter consumption, you can find an interesting correlation here: 2 times as much butter and half as much heart disease. I'm not sure how you would, try to explain that away if butter really was what caused heart disease, which is, of course, not. So we have a paradigm shift going on for many, many reasons, for the scientific reasons and everything else. Used to believe saturated fat was bad, now we're going to see it's safe. Used to believe that carbs were good, even like juice or white bread was pretty good, but now we know it's not. Too much carbs, especially if you have weight problems, diabetes, if you're sensitive to it, too much for a long time can make you fat and sick. And when it comes to fat, I'm going to say like a professor in Sweden, Professor Nilsson, he said, it's time to face the facts. There is no connection between saturated fats and cardiovascular disease. But then I also have to say, have any of you seen this article? Sweden becomes the first Western nation to reject low-fat diet dogma in favor of low-carb, high-fat nutrition. How many people have seen it? A few, at least. It's got like 50,000 Facebook shares, even more now, I think. And this article said that, in Sweden, we're now giving low-carb, high-fat advice to everybody, including children and the elderly and everybody. Should we even do that? I can tell you it's not true. But I would also say, I don't even think we should do that. Why should, that's just going all the way to the opposite direction. We don't have proof that it's good for everybody. We know it's good for weight loss. We know it's good for diabetes. But does everybody have to be on it for life? I don't think we know that. What this article was talking about was really this investigation from 2013, a big Swedish expert review of dietary treatment for obesity. See that? And what they came to the conclusion that the science actually favors a low-carb, high-fat diet for treating obesity. Not everybody is obese, right? But if you are, that is good. And if you know Swedish, you can read these fancy headlines. I guess, well, some of you can, at least. So it says that low-carb is best for quick weight loss, low-carb, high-fat is the most effective diet, and so on, most effective for obesity. And that's what it showed. Not that it's, for everybody necessarily. Maybe it is, but we don't know that. But when it comes to weight loss, we have randomized controlled trials, the gold standard of scientific trials, the best evidence we have. We have at least 20 studies showing that it's more effective than a low-fat diet for losing weight. And how many studies show the opposite? A big fat 0. And still, even though the evidence is pretty clear, when someone with obesity comes to his doctors or dietitian and asks for help, they're often still told this ineffective advice to eat less calories, less of this calorie-rich fat, and run more, even though it always fails in scientific studies. And when they fail doing that, which we know that most people will, we are not going to tell them to go on low carb most of the time. Some doctors do, but most of the time, no. Instead, we give them the advice to go have gastric surgery. And this is, gastric bypass surgery is a huge deal in Sweden. It's like 10,000 people a year. In the world, it's a huge number. And I think we really have to think about this. Is this really a reasonable way to do it? Because what they do is they cut away a large part of the stomach, disconnect a bit of the intestines. Is there a disease there? In those organs that are cut away or disconnected? No. It's healthy organs, right? That we cut away. So we're trying to surgically modify our bodies to be able to handle our industrial food supply, instead of actually adapting the food to our bodies and our genetic makeup, right? Isn't that crazy? Yes. To me, it's crazy. And the most common argument for keeping this up is that the people who end up on the operating table, they've already tried everything else. This is the final solution. There's nothing else to do. But it's not true. I mean, I heard so many stories where it's simply not true. And here's just one of them. This is Johanna Engström. When she was in her 40s, she had fought with her weight for her entire life, and she decided she'd had enough and signed up for this gastric bypass surgery, which she was eligible for. And she was planned for it. It took a year or so until she had the time to go to the hospital with her family. She lived some ways away from that big hospital, and she signed into the hospital. She got into the hospital dress at night, and then early the next morning they would roll her in for surgery. And that night she sort of had a panic attack, and she felt that this was wrong for her. She couldn't do it. It just felt wrong. So she, after a lot of anger, she went out to the people and said, you'll have to give the surgery to someone else. I just can't do it. I'm really sorry. And then she went home to her family, who was staying in the hotel. And then the next day, she started on a low-carb, high-fat diet. Because this is something she'd been thinking about for a long time, but she'd never given it any serious attempt. She actually asked her doctor about it, and he said, don't do it. It doesn't work, it's dangerous. It's not a good idea. But she tried it anyway, and in a year, she lost 112 pounds. With no hunger, with all her healthy organs still intact. Isn't that pretty great? And wouldn't you wish that more people got that chance, got the support even from the doctors and their healthcare professionals? Not someone who says that it's not working for you, it's not gonna work, don't do it. Even, stopping her from this success. That is sad. Why is that, Why do we think in the healthcare system that this, having an omelette with mushrooms for breakfast, is too extreme? It's an extreme diet. We can't recommend people something so extreme, really. So instead, we're going to cut away their healthy organs. That's just insane, right? It's insanity. And it can get even worse. I mean, yeah, you can see that diet to the right. You see how toxic it looks, right? Totally unnatural. Oh wait, maybe it's not. Well, anyway, so what if we do these surgeries on tens of thousands or even millions of people? And what if it's only working for a while? They lose a tremendous amount of weight the first year, but if you don't change your diet, it starts to come back after that. And it's not at all uncommon for people to regain everything and even more. So what do you do? Well, we're experimenting with different things. There is an experiment to implant brain electrodes into the reward system of the brain, and nothing says 1984 like brain electrodes, right? But these were sort of supposed to tell the brain that it's not really looking for food, but it seems it's not working great. There was also a drug that tried to do the same thing, but it ended up, people did not just lose interest in food, they lost interest in everything and committed suicide, so had to stop using that drug, fortunately. Yeah, and if this is not crazy enough, how about this and other surgery that people are experimenting with in Sweden, among other places? You put a tube into your stomach, and it hangs out underneath your clothes. And the idea is you eat your food, and then you go to the bathroom, pull up your shirt, pull out the tube, and pour the food into the toilet, right? Which is like, you know, doctor prescribed bulimia, really. Yeah. And I think the most silly thing about it is you don't even need to implant a tube into your stomach because you already have one, right? For the esophagus, right? So you can do it yourself for free if you like, without surgery. But nobody is recommending that, and there's no money to be made doing that, and nobody would recommend that. But when you sort of dress it into this sort of medical terminology, and then you can do it. How about just eating real food? Here's a friend of mine called Ronnie Mattison. I didn't know him when this picture was taken, but I know him now. He'd been struggling with his weight for his entire life, never really giving any serious try to losing it. But you know, when he saw himself, he felt that in these sort of pictures, he felt that it's time to do something. So he asked on his Facebook page, you know, can you lose 20 pounds in 10 weeks? Is it possible? And one of his friends answered him that, yeah, it's possible with low carb. So Ronnie decided to try this out, and he did something unusual. He took a picture of himself in underwear before and after, and then he put them into a computer and let it, you know, calculate like a morph, yeah, exactly how he looked between. So have a look at it. This is while, you know, see, something is happening. This is while he's eating a low-carb, high-fat diet, eating as much as he likes, and he's losing weight. Lost 70 pounds, and this is from the side. See the sort of fat melting away. It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Without counting calories, without extra exercise, without being hungry. Pretty awesome. Yeah. Of course, it doesn't work this well with everybody, but it works really well with a lot of people, and at least people should get the chance to try this before you put them on the operating table, I think. Of course, it's not just about weight. You know that. It's equally or even more about health. And this is most clear of all when it comes to diabetes. Diabetes, even if it's type 1 or if it's type 2, is about having too much sugar in your blood. And where does the sugar in the blood come from? Well, it comes from the food we eat, right? Primarily, like 90% from the carbohydrates we eat. That's what turns into sugar in the body, which is interesting to keep in mind. Because there's something going on in the world. In the 80s, there were 30 million type 2 diabetics in the world. Anybody know how many there are now? 13 times more. It's crazy. It's even worse than the obesity epidemic. And it just keeps going. You know, even in China and India, it's a crazy epidemic out there. And it's going to be way past 500 million in not long. Breaking the healthcare economies of large countries, and, you know, leading to incredible suffering that is probably not necessary at all. Are we giving diabetics completely sick advice? I think we are. You know, this is a food pyramid for diabetics, and you can see the base is starchy food like bread, pasta, rice, and potatoes that raise the blood sugar. And if you look at the My Plate, you have mostly a big part of it is lots of sugar and starch. And the ironic thing is that 100 years ago, we knew better. Before people were afraid of fat, before we had drugs to sort of hide this problem, when you only had diet to fix it, here's what you did. This is a book, just one of many books. I mean, there are a lot of similar books, but this one you can read for free online if you like. Diabetic Cookery Recipes. And I'm going to show you the most interesting piece of it, page 12 and 13. You can see to the left here on page 12 the food that diabetics are supposed to eat, and to the right the food that they are supposed to avoid. And let's start with the food that they are supposed to avoid to the right here. You can see number 1 is sugar, and then we have starchy foods, flour and bread and biscuits and rice, and then macaroni or pasta, as it's called today. Can you see the header of this page? It's foods strictly forbidden. That is now the base of the food pyramid. The largest part of the My Plate guide. When we have an epidemic of diabetics, we just keep getting sicker and sicker, no matter how many medications they take. And that, I would say, is hardly a coincidence. Let's have a look to the left on the page that summarizes what people should be eating. You can see, what is it? Butter and olive oil and a lot of cheeses. They like cheese. And meat and fish and eggs. So if you only add plenty of vegetables to this, it's basically an Atkins diet or low carb high fat diet or the diet that I've been teaching diabetics to eat for 10 years with the result that every single person who tried this, they all improved their blood sugar. And it's not even surprising, it shouldn't be. Because if you eat less of what turns into sugar in the gut, then you get less sugar in the body. It's not rocket science, really. You may have to go to medical school and study to become a professor or something to not understand it. Because it is so obvious, it's very hard not to understand it. And there are plenty of studies on this. You can check them out on the DietDoctor website if you like. So I'm not going to show you lots of graphs on that. I don't have the time for it now. You can check it out if you like. What's even more interesting to me is that you, like I said, you don't even have to study all the science if you don't want to. You actually only need a blood sugar meter to test this for yourself. 2 meals and 4 pricks in your fingers, something like that. Here's some food I ate a few years ago, and this is meat fried in butter, and then there's vegetables fried in butter, and then there's sauce béarnaise, which is of course melted butter and egg yolks, right? So this is like a nightmare for an old-fashioned dietitian. It's like a all saturated, dangerous fat and almost no carbs. And when you so little carbs that when you start eating this, you can feel how your brain is slowly shutting down because of severe carb deficiency. Have you experienced that? Me neither, actually. So I don't really think it's true. Well, I know it's not true. But what happens to your blood sugar? I decided to try this out, and on the vertical axis you have blood sugar, and it's normal to keep it below 100 or so, and then when you're fasting, maybe a little bit higher, and then you have time after eating up to 6 hours. So this is what happened. It turned into a really boring evening for me. I was testing my blood sugar over and over, and pretty much nothing happened. Which shouldn't be surprising, because if you don't eat more than a few grams of carbs, nothing much is coming into your bloodstream, and the blood sugar stays where it is. And then you need a contrast to this, right? Another meal to test. And for that, I went to the largest obesity conference in the world, called the International Congress of Obesity, where 10,000 doctors and researchers go every year to learn the latest there is to know about obesity treatment and obesity research. A few years ago it was in Stockholm, so I decided to go, and ironically I was served the worst lunch I've had that I can remember. Here they are serving it up, and if you don't believe me, the sign says International Congress of Obesity 2010 Stockholm, today's lunch. And here's all of it. You can see, of course, there's sugar in the chocolate bar. There's also sugar in the fruit, even if it's combined with a little bit of fiber and vitamin C. There's also a ton of sugar, added sugar in the yogurt, 12 grams per 12%. And then the sandwich is all starch. Although I guess you, like me, would be at least slightly hopeful that there's something high fat, high protein, nice stuff inside it, but you would be equally disappointed. This is supposed to be a tuna sandwich, but you can see it's like a homeopathic dose here. It doesn't count, if you're low carb, it doesn't count at all, so it's all starch. And here's what happened. I was a little bit shocked myself actually. It went up to 180 in less than an hour, and then it crashes, as you can see, to after 3 or 4 hours it's below where it was before I ate. And as you can imagine, I got really hungry and wanted to eat something bad, but I didn't, and it gets up again. But this is sort of what happens, you know, when you eat this sort of food. Your sugar goes up and then it goes down, and then you get hungry and you eat again, and you gain weight. And compare that to the other meal where, you know, you might not even have to have breakfast the next day. I often don't have breakfast the next day because I don't need it, I'm still full. So you don't need to eat every 3 hours if you eat good food. And some people might say that, you know, this top line, which is, you know, I don't have diabetes, by the way. If I did have diabetes, it could have went, you know, through the roof, basically. Stayed up for hours. But some might argue that no way that diabetics are told to eat this. Are they?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they are. Yeah, exactly, they are. You know, the yogurt is fine, the sandwich is absolutely fine, and the fruit is a bonus. And when you've been this good, following the guidelines this perfectly, aren't you worth a little bit of chocolate once in a while? You're not supposed to go all extreme, right? You have to have a balanced diet and a balance of, you know, chocolate and other things. So this is exactly what you end up with when you're hungry and you've been good, and you reward yourself with a little bit of chocolate. And this is what happened. So it's not unusual. In fact, if you look at this brochure from Sweden, it's called Food for Diabetics, and you know, you can see the big bowl of fruit and the big thumbs up, and you can guess what's coming, right? So it says that food that raises the blood sugar slowly is good. For example, fruit, rice, pasta, potatoes, and bread. And who's giving out this advice, you think? Well, of course, it's a pharmaceutical company. A company that sells drugs to lower blood sugar, gives out advice that they even say themselves raises blood sugar, so you need more drugs, and they make more money. Well, it's not strange. This is market economy, it's capitalism. They have a responsibility to their shareholders. This is how they increase the profits. The shareholders wins, everybody else loses, right? Don't take lifestyle advice from a pharmaceutical company. You would be stupid, right? Because it's in their interest to keep you sick forever, as long as possible. Keep you alive, yes, but sick. That's how they make their profits. If you get healthy, they lose. So why should they help you? Think about it. Here's another conference, the biggest diabetes conference in the world, a couple of years ago in Vienna. I went there and I got served lunch. You guess what's in the brown paper bags, and you guess it's same thing again, and you know, I had to test my blood sugar, and it's a little bit depressing, right? And then I went to a low-carb, high-fat conference in Cape Town last year. What did they serve for lunch? Check it out. Suddenly it's real food, low-carb food. Food that will keep you satisfied for a long time. Compare that to what people are serving at an obesity conference. Food that makes people obese, right? Or at a diabetes conference. Food that gives people diabetes. They don't get it. They really don't get it. But these people get it. And there is at least some hope that a lot of people are starting to get it. In Sweden, at least, we have now guidelines for diabetics where they say that a moderate low-carb diet is probably excellent. They don't feel comfortable yet to suggest a strict low-carb diet. But I would say, you know, if you're a healthcare professional in Sweden, you could lean on this and you know, give advice on a moderate low-carb diet for diabetics. You get moderately good results, which is actually pretty good compared to the shitty results you get if you follow the old-style diet advice. And if you feel comfortable like me to give advice on extreme low-carb diets, you will get extremely good results. It's true. It's absolutely true. So we had like a three-stage rocket in Sweden. We have first this verdict that it's okay to give advice on a low-carb, high-fat diet as a medical doctor. Then it's okay to give at least a moderate low-carb advice to diabetics. In fact, it's probably like even the best option. And in 2013, they said, yeah, a low-carb, high-fat diet is probably the best diet to lose weight. So things are happening. And here's a final Swedish professor giving some words of wisdom to you. He's called Professor Nyström. And he was one of the participants in this government expert review of low-carb diets for obesity. He said this: when all recent scientific reports are lined up, the result is clear. Our deeply rooted fear of fat has been a mistake. And you don't get fat from eating fat, just like you don't become green by eating vegetables. This is what's happening in Sweden. We're about to turn the obesity epidemic around, perhaps. This is what it looked like in 1984. I'm sure you've seen what happened a year ago. They published this Time magazine cover saying, eat butter. Scientists labeled fat the enemy, why they were wrong. So of course this is not just a Swedish thing. We just had a head start of a few years maybe, but it's going on all around the world. Here are a few examples of what it can make happen. This is My Westerdahl before and after she started eating a low-carb diet, took control over her sugar addiction and lost 174 pounds. She actually lost even more after that. My Sörman, who didn't just lose weight, she lost her type 2 diabetes. Went away. And Josephine Larsson, just one of all these young people with a weight problem who never had to be hungry to become thin again. So how do we spread this? How do we help not just these people and the people in this room, but millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people? The change is never going to come from the top, because there is massive resistance, right? People are making money from this, and it's hard to change your mind and say you've been wrong. So most of the change has to come from the bottom up, I believe. Like many of you, I felt I had to do at least my small part of it. So I started a blog in Sweden about 8 years ago, called 8.5 years ago now, called Kostdoktorn, or DietDoctor in Swedish. And it's been an exciting journey. I mean, I knew nothing about blogging or writing when I started to do this. Lots of people write better than me, and a lot of people dress better than me, which sounds like a strange thing to say. Even, of course, it's true, obviously. But what does it matter? Well, most bloggers, at least in Sweden, it's about showing your daily outfit to the world. This is Kinsa. She's the most popular blogger in Sweden. And, look at that. I thought that maybe if I did the same thing, I would too have concept readers. But it turned out it wasn't my thing really. So I went back to writing about what I know about, which is boring stuff like diet and health and science. Boring science. But still, in a month there were 500 visits a day. A year later, 5,000 visits in a day. And then we started an English blog, me and my co-workers, and now we have 100,000 visitors a day. Pretty cool. So people want to know about this, and people can make a difference. People like us in this room, we can make a difference by telling people, or trying to be an inspiration at least. Using the internet, we have great possibilities to spread information for free, basically, right? So I think all of us are using Facebook or whatever. We can make a difference. And big things are happening. This is Google searches in Sweden. How about Google searches for LCHF in the US? Have a look at this. Pretty nice graph. Starting in 2011 and then, going up. Still below low carb, but it's going up. Low carb is also going up, by the way. So it's becoming more and more popular. So I sort of faced a choice, I think, because this was taking more and more of my time. I was still working as a doctor, as my main job. in this clinic in my hometown. And it was great, you know, but you can only help basically one person at a time when they come in. And what if you believe that you could actually, in that time, you could help 10 people? In the future, maybe 100 people, maybe 1,000 people. Would it still be okay to only select to help one person at a time? I don't think so. I think at some stage you have to think, yeah, if I can do something that is more impactful in another way, then you have to choose that. So I did, and 1 year ago I quit my job as a doctor and went into only doing this. And but even that is not enough, because I can't change the world. Nobody can change the world by themselves. So, but what if you can build an organization that can change the world, an organization that can grow and become, you know, more impactful every year, like grow exponentially? So that is sort of what me and a few friends decided to try. And to do that, and to get a lot of people to be able to work full time or even more on this, you need revenue, because, well, that's just what it is. People need a fair wage to be able to do this full time. And how do you do that? We don't want ads. I mean, I hate ads, so there's no ads on the site. We don't want to sell products. I don't think it's a good idea, actually. I mean, maybe sometimes you have to, but ideally you wouldn't do it, because then you become biased to say that the product you're selling is great, whatever it is, supplements and that. So we don't sell any supplements. And what if you take like money from the meat industry or the dairy industry or something? Nobody would believe you, right? So we take no money from the food industry or the pharmaceutical industry or any industry. So we decided we want to be funded by the people somehow. We want to be funded by the people we try to help, so that our only incentive, our only alignment is to help those people. So we decided to start a membership. So most of the stuff on the site is free forever, all you need, but then you can get an optional membership for extra stuff. And even that is free for a month. And after that, it's $9 a month. So most people in the US at least could be able to afford it. So that's what we decided to try. And you get a lot of like videos, video courses, video interviews, even some movies, and presentations like from this conference and other conferences. And there were lots of people who said that, you know, this is never going to work, because online nobody pays for anything, right? It's all information is supposed to be free, everything. But it turned out actually they were wrong, because in less than 2 years we passed 15,000 members. And if you do the math on that times $9, it turns out it's quite a lot. So you can do a lot. And what do? Well, we use every dollar for building the organization and do more. So now we're 8 people working, with 7 people working full-time, 1 part-time, and like 15 freelancers. Not everybody is in this picture. But that's what we do, and I think the cool thing is that thanks to our members, we're only funded by the people, like I say. We're completely independent, which is important. And we are growing exponentially. So more than doubling size every year. We can do quite a lot now already. What about next year or the year after? If we're 2 times bigger next year and 4 times bigger the next year, it's going to be very exciting. Really, I think the future looks exciting, and I hope that this organization, me and my co-workers and all the people, we're trying to work with the best people in the world. I hope we can do a big difference in the years to come. So to end this presentation, I was going to show a short video from the cruise last year. Fortunately, I don't think we have audio here. So, no, we don't have audio. So you can go to the DietDoctor website if you like and watch this video. Yeah, plugged in, yeah. But it doesn't matter. You can watch it on the DietDoctor website. It's people who went on a low carb diet, who lost weight, who improved their health massively. Lisa Kotlecher is on the cruise. Hannah Boetius is on the cruise. 2 of the people in the video. And now, stories like that. That's why we exist, to make it more simple for people to make these journeys, to make low carb simple. And we will do all we can to empower people everywhere to revolutionize their health, because it's possible. And you can be an important part of that too. Thank you.